I know we might have some seniors. Let me see, we have juniors, we have a senior in here, and then we have some sophomores. So we do have a variety of students in here. But I know seniors right now, it's your time to shine. You guys are headed out the door. And so some of you all have already started getting acceptance letters, and you all will soon start receiving your financial aid award packages. They can be a little scary at the beginning, but we hope this presentation clears up some questions, concerns, and we will have questions at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Consuela Perez. I have been working in student financial aid. I'm almost embarrassed to even admit it. It's probably been about 19 years now, and I have definitely been in your shoes, literally. Not only was I a first-generation college student, but I was also a student who came from a household where my mother had zero clue how to help me through the financial aid process and figuring out how I was going to ultimately pay to go to college. If you have any questions during the presentation, the chat will be open if you want to reach out to myself or Brenda, who's also going to be helping me with the chat. Feel free to do so privately if you want, or to wait to the end and ask it as a group. We will have some time set aside, not only just for your questions about the presentation, but if you have questions about your specific financial aid award letter that you may have received at your college or university. So without any further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm not going to be offended if you're not looking in the camera or you don't have your camera on and you're looking at the slides. I did provide it to them earlier, so if you want to grab a copy of the PowerPoint, feel free to ask for that as well. So paying for college, super important information that you'll need. That's both Brenda and myself so that you can remember our faces and our names. We'll also provide our direct contact information at the end of the presentation, so you've got our direct phone number and our email address for any burning questions you may have. So essentially 3 things that we're going to review in the presentation, you all. Not just paying for college, but answering questions such as, how do you pay for college with those financial aid basics? Essential steps of what you need to do, and importantly, when you need to do it. And then finally, Brenda's going to cover the tools and resources of how you can get help and where a lot of those online resources are. Again, going to allow time for questions and answers. Also, feel free to chat if you want, and then getting those award letters ready if any of you would like to share those. So one thing that I impart on students when they're going through the financial aid process is, don't rule out a college just because of the cost that you see on your award letter or on their website. You'll be surprised by how much financial aid offers will fluctuate depending on the college or university that you're looking at. Private schools generally cost a lot more than public colleges and universities. 4-year universities cost more than 2-year schools, and everything in between. Now, a lot of those schools have a lot of things in common, such as federal financial aid. You've probably heard of the FAFSA application or the TASPA application in Texas. Those are just some of the forms that colleges and universities use to determine what and how much financial aid a student is eligible for at their school. Literally every single year, billions of dollars of financial aid is provided to undergraduate students to help them achieve their college dream. And it's not just in the form of grants, the infamous student loans, and also work study is a useful way to help students with some of those itty-bitty expenses that you have as you're going through college. And I want you all to be open to taking advantage of them as your family situation dictates. So when you hear colleges and universities start tossing around all of these terms like net price, sticker price, cost of attendance, EFC, I have no idea what they're talking about. Bottom line, how much money am I going to have to pay out of pocket? That's the question that your mom and dad are asking you. So when you see a sticker price or what the college or university puts on their website, that's going to list things such as tuition and fees, housing, meal plans, additional expenses that that college or university may have for other items at their university or college. And then things like books and supplies and transportation go into that total cost of attendance, even if you don't pay that directly to the university. The big things that you want to make sure that you're mindful of are the things that you'll pay the university directly for tuition and fees, housing and meal plan. Those are usually the big four things to look out for. So how do colleges and universities determine how much money to give to a student? That varies, and we'll go into that in a little bit. When you hear the term gift aid, that's referring to money that you do not have to pay back. Let me say that again. When you hear gift aid, that is a gift from the college or university. Now, if you hear the word grant, oftentimes that's based on financial need. Sometimes it may be a combination of financial need as well as academic merit. If you hear scholarships, and that's the most common thing that all of us want, right? Those are usually going to be awards that are given from that college or university for various things based on grades, based on your performance in certain activities, based on your participation in certain types of groups and organizations. So when you're working with different colleges, make note of how they determine their eligibility for scholarships at their school. Just to give you an example, looking at Southern Methodist University, for our university, all of our scholarships are based solely on merit, which means financial need does not come into the equation at all. However, I have colleagues that work at Harvard, yes, the Harvard that's in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Their scholarships are 100% based on financial need. So that's how a lot of students are able to afford to go to a university like Harvard that may not necessarily have the financial means to do so otherwise. So when you hear net price, that's the real amount that your family is expected to pay. It takes into account, that total cost of attendance minus the gift aid. Net price is where your focus should be in determining whether or not a college or university is affordable. Universities are required to have a free personalized estimate on their website called a net price calculator that helps a family determine at their particular school based on information that you provide to them. And you can use this right now for any college or university. Their website has to have that net price calculator. The way that it works, you input certain parts of your parents' finances, your family size. It'll ask a few other questions to get an idea of what your, not just financial picture, but also your academic picture looks like, and give you an estimate of how much your out-of-pocket expenses would be at that school based on the information you provide. So to look at our example here, you'll see that the cost of attendance at this particular school is almost $73,000. That's a lot of donuts, as someone would say. Now, of that, you're probably thinking, how on earth can anyone afford to go to a college that costs almost $73,000 for 1 year? Notice down here where it says the estimated grant/gift aid is over $57,000 at this particular example university. So when you subtract that gift aid from that cost of attendance, it leaves a net price of less than $16,000 that this family would have to pay for you to be able to afford to go to school there. That's less than the cost of most public universities in the state of Texas. So that just shows you how net price oftentimes can help you determine if maybe your college dream may take you to a school that you may have otherwise discounted based on what you thought the sticker price was. So there are essentially 3 types of financial aid, and we talked a little bit about grants and scholarships or gift aid. Free money, that's what we all want to maximize. That free money can come from the federal government. It can come from the state government. And Texas is pretty generous with regard to state grant money, whether a student is going to a 2-year or 4-year school, public or private. Many states have resources in addition to what you get from the federal government to assist you in going to college. And then private sources oftentimes have scholarship money. One of the biggest scholarship programs is probably one that a lot of you all have heard about, called the Gates Millennium Foundation Scholarship. For that particular scholarship for students who are generally high need and also going into STEM areas, it will cover the cost of their tuition and fees for the most part for all 4 years of their undergraduate career. and oftentimes when it extends beyond that. I've worked at universities where those checks would come in for students, and the dollar amounts were usually over $20,000, $30,000 a year. Even if you're having to purchase items like special computer software or actual hardware itself, you provide the receipt to the Gates Foundation. They provide the scholarship to cover that as well as a supplement. That's just one example of a private source of scholarships to help students afford college. Most of you have probably heard of the federal Pell Grant program. That's the biggest program and the one that's been around for an awful long time. Had it not been for the federal Pell Grant, I could not have afforded to go to college. All 4 years of my undergraduate degree, I received a maximum Pell Grant award. Back then, the Pell Grant was probably about $3,000 because college was not very expensive back then. So the actual cost of what it covered at my public four-year university covered about 70% of my costs just with the Pell Grant. Right now, the full Pell Grant award for the upcoming school year for you seniors, the maximum is $6,495 a year. That does not cover full-time tuition and fees at any public university in Texas that I know of. And it definitely doesn't cover the full amount of a private university. For a two-year school, though, it will cover the full tuition cost that you have at a two-year school in Texas. However, the way that you can afford to stack that Pell Grant with other state grant money and other forms of the second item, student loans, that's how students are oftentimes able to afford to go to college as a Pell Grant recipient. And also, don't forget scholarships as well, can be stacked with that. For those of you who are seniors and have already started receiving your financial aid packages, you've probably noticed the infamous federal student loan listed there. The dollar amount that you see at every college or university should be the exact same, $5,500. The reason why it's the same is because the dollar amount for that particular loan is set by the federal government according to your grade level. So first year students can receive $5,500 your first year, any college or university. Second year students can get up to $6,500 a year. And then beginning your junior year and beyond until you graduate, you can get up to $7,500 a year as a federal student loan. Different repayment plans on those loans, not credit-based either. So even if you have horrible credit, and most 17-year-old students don't have any credit, but these are not loans that require any kind of credit decision whatsoever. The FAFSA application is the only application that you have to do in order to apply for the federal student loans. And there are additional things that you have to do at the college once you commit to going there to receive it, but you actually don't begin repayment on that loan until 6 months after you graduate from college or drop below half-time. In addition to federal student loans, there are also private loans that can help a family afford a college or university. But I always stress that private loans should be used as a last resort. Private loans are credit-based loans, which means the interest rate is going to vary. Usually the interest rate on the federal student loans is going to be relatively low, but the private loans are just like any private loan that you or I would get out in the real world, where it's going to be based on your credit. Most 17, 18-year-old students don't have sufficient credit, which means your parent or some other adult has to be a cosigner. And not a lot of adults want to co-sign on private student loans, not knowing if at some point they may be on the limb for paying that loan. But it is a source of funding for students as a last resort if it becomes available. And then also working. One of the most interesting jobs I've ever had as a person was as a work study student when I was an undergraduate student. My job, and this is what started me on my path at what I do to this day, I was the work study student for the financial aid office at the front desk, and I answered the phone. I answered the phone so much that here we are over 27 years later, I can still remember the extensions for every single advisor and the director in that office. It was a wonderful opportunity that allowed me to see behind the scenes, but also it gave me the opportunity to get all of my financial aid in order every year as I was working at that school and still earning money that helped me with the little things that I didn't even think about coming out of high school. forgetting that, man, I've got to buy sheets. I've got to make sure that my books are paid for. How am I going to get money to get to and from these events that I'm trying to do? How am I going to save money to get a car? It was my work study money that helped me do that. So don't discount the opportunity that you may have to work while you're in school. The other big benefit of the work study program at colleges and universities is that we're required, we meaning the people that work at the school, we have to schedule your job around your class schedule. That's different than a part-time job that you would get out in the community. They don't care that you have class at 9 o'clock Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But at the college or university, if you're a work study student, we are required to schedule your work hours around all of our academic calendar. Even if we're closed for inclement weather, we cannot require you to report to work. You have final exams, we can't allow you to work. That's a huge benefit that I know your parents would like to. Get the benefit of working, flexibility around your school schedule, and still getting that opportunity to earn real life work experience to put on your resume. So financial aid eligibility, and I alluded to this a little bit earlier, that some aid is based on financial need, some of it is based on achievement or merit, and sometimes it's based on both. It really just depends on that college or university and how they determine the student's eligibility, particularly for things like grants and scholarships. For financial need and the way that we think about it in the real world, everybody needs money to go to school. The example I gave you with that net price calculator for that school that cost over $72,000 a year, I don't know about you all, I don't have $72,000 a year to give my son to go to college every year. I don't have it. So if I tell a university, I need financial aid, the way that they interpret it is based on this formula that you see over here. It has a definitive term. Cost of attendance minus that expected family contribution number, which comes from the free application for federal student aid. It's not something that you calculate yourself, but one thing that I will leave you, if you don't remember anything else that I say in the presentation, the closer to zero, the better for that number. Zero means that when you complete the FAFSA application, that it determines that your family is not expected to contribute anything, which means the college has to use some kind of financial aid package, combination of grants, scholarships, work study, and loans to cover the full cost of attendance. I've seen that number go pretty high. I do work at SMU after all. But if you're closer to zero, that means that that college or university is going to give you the maximum amount of need-based money that they possibly can. The other thing to make sure that you maximize at your college or university are deadlines. I can't say that enough, particularly for state grant money in Texas particularly. A lot of things like Texas Grant, that's at public universities. Things like the TEOG, that's a grant at 2-year colleges. The tuition equalization grant is what you'll be offered at private universities in Texas. We have priority deadlines that we have to use because we're only given a certain pool of money to distribute to as many students as we possibly can. So if a student meets our institutional priority deadline, and it varies depending on schools. A lot of schools will give first-year students a really, really early priority deadline because we know that generally speaking, you have until May 1st to make a decision about where you're going to college. So we try to tell you and encourage you to apply early so that we can give your financial aid package to you early enough so that you can commit before May 1st. But as a returning student, and yes, I'm sorry to say, this is not the only time you have to apply for financial aid. It's like taxes. You have to do it every year, sorry. So after this year, every year that you're in college, you'll have to renew that financial aid application, the FAFSA at the minimum. Also for students, for those of you who yourself or you may know a friend or a fellow colleague who is an undocumented student in Texas, not only do you qualify for in-state tuition rates at public colleges and universities, 2-year and 4-year, but you also qualify for state grant money. You don't complete the FAFSA application, you have to complete something called the TASFA, the Texas Application for State Financial Aid. Every college and university, public and private, should have it on their financial aid website. You complete that with the same supplemental documents that most students submitting the FAFSA will have to submit, still have to apply by the priority deadline, and you will also be considered for the same grant money that other students who submitted the FAFSA are also being considered for the same dollar amounts too. Also, for students who are DACA students, in addition to getting the in-state tuition rates, also connect with your college or university to ask if their scholarships are also open to students who may be DACA students. Schools like SMU, because all of our scholarships are based on merit, that's open to any student, whether it be a DACA student, a permanent resident, US citizen, or even an international student. All of our scholarships are based on merit. But if you're attending a college or university that may specify their scholarships are designated for certain types of students, you just have to ask the question. Most often their website, not only for admission, but financial aid, will make that distinction. So the sources of financial aid, and I know this is like super red, you all, but I wanted to catch your attention as far as those sources, again, to reiterate where you get financial aid from. Federal government, biggest programs that you'll see are the federal Pell Grant and then federal student loans. Work study to a smaller degree, but definitely the federal Pell Grant and federal student loans are the biggest sources of aid from the federal government. The FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, is the required document to receive any kind of federal financial aid. State governments, again, in Texas, most of our applications are through the FAFSA, so there's no separate application for most forms of state financial aid unless you're a DACA student. There's a supplemental application that you have to do for that. Almost forgot to mention, if you're going to a public college or university in Texas, we have various types of exemptions which will exempt you from paying public in-state tuition rates if you meet one of those exemptions. The biggest exemption program in Texas is something called the Hazelwood exemption. For those of you who are either military connected or military dependents, that means that for those individuals, you do not pay any tuition at a public college or university if you meet the requirements for the Hazelwood exemption. That's the biggest one. But there are several different types of exemptions at public colleges and universities, both 2-year and 4-year. Also, the colleges and universities that you all are applying to have various types of need and merit-based programs that they offer, usually in the form of scholarships and sometimes grants too. You'll find that your private universities like Baylor, Rice will have the bigger scholarship programs. Not to discount the UNTs and the Texas A&Ms of the world, they do as well. They just generally don't have as much because their costs aren't as much. And don't get like all wide-eyed and bushy-tailed when you see a really, really big scholarship package from those private universities. What they're trying to do is to make their school more affordable for you. And they do have very generous endowments that allow them to do that. On this very last part of that college and university section, I did mention, and we'll reiterate this in a second, there's a separate financial aid application that those of you who apply to private schools will be required to do. It's called the CSS profile. CSS stands for College Scholarship Service. For those of you who have actually completed the SAT or taken anything through AP, you've probably been on the College Board's website for that, but there's a separate section on the College Board site specific for this financial aid application. It's quite common in the Ivy League schools and the schools in the East Coast, not as common in Texas though. There are a handful of universities, private universities in Texas, that requires both the FAFSA and that CSS profile. And it's used to determine a student's eligibility for need-based grant money that comes directly from that school. And again, private organizations also have a large number of scholarships for various things that you can qualify for. And then those infamous private student loans as well. So to reiterate the financial aid applications that are available to apply for financial aid, most common one is the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. At any college or university for which you're applying for financial aid, that is going to typically be the only financial aid application that you'll have to do. Never pay to complete the FAFSA application. If you see one of these offshoot websites, do not pay any money to complete the FAFSA application. It's a free application for federal student aid, infamous on free. Again, the CSS profile is that separate financial aid application that is done through the College Board's website for private universities to apply for need-based money that comes from that school. I'll caution you, it does have a cost associated with it. However, on the CSS profile application is embedded with a fee waiver, so that if you answer certain questions and meet various types of requirements, like you're on free or reduced lunch, or your family may be receiving public assistance, just like you got fee waivers for some of you to do the ACT or SAT, it will give you an automatic fee waiver for the CSS profile as well. And then last but not least, the state application for financial aid, which is called the TASFA, the Texas Application for State Financial Aid. So essential steps for seniors. What do you need to do and when do you need to do it? If you haven't already, make sure that you've submitted your FAFSA application. It may look a tad bit daunting, but the first time that you submit it, you're gonna need your mom and dad's help. There's no getting around it because it asks questions about your mom and dad, things that you're probably not gonna know. Even some things that you may want to know, like, mom, dad, what's your date of birth? It even asks questions about that. But it's also gonna ask income-related questions that most students won't know about their parents. If you can, when you're submitting the FAFSA, there's a nifty tool called an IRS data retrieval tool that will allow you to electronically move the information from your and or your parents' 1040 form. And for this upcoming year, it should be asking for their 2019 tax information. So it will allow them to move that information electronically where they don't have to manually enter it. That's awesome because it minimizes the number of potential errors that you make. Also, making sure if your college or university requires it, private universities primarily, make sure that you also submit that CSS profile application. If the TASFA application applies to you, be sure to follow up with each and every single college or university that you're applying to submit that same application and those same supplemental materials to their financial aid offices. And then something that oftentimes families forget, but people like Brenda and me are sources that can help you through the financial aid process. Like I mentioned, not paying to submit the FAFSA application. Don't pay a person to give you financial aid advice because we get paid to do this as part of our job. Just like I reached out to the Upward Bound program to let them know, hey, I'm here. If you all need to use me, to give you any information that you may need about financial aid. Don't be afraid to talk to your financial aid advisor at your college or university because there may be certain things about your family's circumstances. Lord knows with the coronavirus this past year and going into it, there are going to be so many different types of unusual circumstances, changes in income, things that may be different from what your 2019 parents' tax return said versus what the reality is right now for your family. So don't be afraid to share that information with them because it may make you eligible for additional grant money, particularly, or scholarships that you may not have been eligible for otherwise had we not even known. And then last but not least, but certainly apply for any and every scholarship that you can possibly find at this point. Your local civic organizations, your churches, your parents' jobs, temples, anything that you can think of, not just utilizing the college and university scholarships, but supplemental scholarships too that you can take to any college or university. Oftentimes students forget that those dollar amounts may sound small, but if you receive enough of them, they stack up pretty well. And again, you can take them to any college or university as you're going through this process. So the last thing that I wanted to make sure that we made sure that we handled and helped address with you all are specific questions that you have about your financial aid award letters. I'm going to answer questions like, what's an award letter? Where do you find it? And can you negotiate your financial aid package? We get asked that question a lot, actually. So a financial aid award letter or aid offer, I'll put air quotes around that because oftentimes that notification is going to state not just the type of financial aid you're receiving at that college or university, but the dollar amounts for each of those awards. And it's what we're going to give you if you decide to come to our prestigious college or university. You'll notice that that award letter is going to fluctuate a whole bunch, depending on what college or university you're applying to. So don't be surprised if you see a really, really generous financial aid package from a private university that is significantly different from a small regional public university whose costs are significantly less. You'll see some things that will be similar, like the federal student loan that I talked about, the federal Pell Grant that I talked about, because those dollar amounts are governed by the FAFSA application, but pretty much everything else can fluctuate. Where do you get the award letter? Well, most often it's not a letter. Most often it's going to be a notification that you're given access through that college or university's online student portal. Every time you get admitted to a college or university, we have to then not only tell you, congratulations, we're super excited for you, but this is how you access all of your admission information, financial aid information, letting us know you want to come to our school, and we have to provide you access to the portal in order to see that information, and then usually to make some kind of decision on it. You'll probably have numerous online student portals to see that information. Some schools will follow up and actually mail a paper award letter to you, but don't be surprised when they don't. Most don't. Private universities are probably some of the few that still do, but most public universities are going to be an online portal that you'll see that information. And please, students, share it with your mom and dad so that they can see it too and help you as you're making this process. But then that last part of that question is oftentimes the money's never enough to cover that full cost of attendance. So the question that we're asked, can you negotiate your package? Depends. And you have to be smart about it, because oftentimes just saying, this is not enough money. We hear that. We hear that a lot. And we know that. But we want to understand, what is it about your financial aid package that you may think is not going to be sufficient? Things such as, I am a super excellent student. I received a financial aid package at Baylor, TCU, and your packages are like $30,000 off. Oftentimes with schools, if you share that information, usually with that financial aid award letter or notification, or even a screenshot from their online student portal, sometimes you may see a bump in your scholarship or maybe an adjustment to your grant package. You never know until you ask. Also, because we're in the middle of a pandemic and this is unprecedented, I've seen colleges and universities moving money like you can't believe, because we understand that this is presenting a huge financial stressor on families to make college decisions right now. So there may be money available just this upcoming year that may not be available ever again at that college or university unless you ask for it. Particularly if your family's been impacted by the coronavirus in some way, make sure you're communicating that information to the college or university. But sometimes even just saying that, I'm fully committed to coming to your school, I absolutely adore it, but I just can't flat out afford it. Please, is there anything you can do in order to make this dream happen for me? Particularly connecting not just with your financial aid counselor, but your admission counselor at that school can sometimes make a difference in how you negotiate your financial aid package. So I'll kick it to Brenda so that she can finish out with our tools and resources. Oh, Brenda, you're
Hi,
muted.
everyone.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good. Hi, everyone. For those of you that just came in, my name is Brenda, and I work with Consuela at SMU. My title is an enrollment resources specialist, so it's my job to know everything when y'all are coming in, whether that's applying, enrolling, matriculating, all that good stuff. So there are a lot of tools and resources made available for you in regards to financial aid. As Consuela mentioned, we have the net price calculator. And something that I always recommend to students before they decide to call up people and start asking questions is just to look over the financial aid website. Oftentimes, they already have a lot of resourceful tools on there. And even then, you might just have to do some digging, but definitely take advantage of these resources. They're there and they're free and they're made available to you for a reason. Secondly, we have the College Board organization that you've heard of a lot. As you know by now, they facilitate a lot of different resources to students, whether that's testing, applying for the CSS profile, etc. They also have a site, as you can see here, scholarships.collegeboard.org, where you can purposely just apply and look for scholarships that can be made available to you. And you can even filter the search so that you can apply for ones that are exclusively for like minorities, underrepresented communities, some that are specific to any majors that you might be interested in, such as STEM, for example. And then we have the FAFSA as well. So FAFSA isn't just the site where you go in and send in your application. If you do need help, and very often, sometimes students will have to end up talking to the FAFSA customer service team, go ahead and just, write all these links down, getfafsahelp.org. This is where you can go, and they've just added this really useful chatbot function where you can actually kind of text somebody and they'll help you real time. Now, this is super helpful. When I was in college, which was about 2 years ago, wasn't that long ago, it wasn't that easy to get in contact with somebody at FAFSA. So they've made it infinitely easier throughout the years to make sure that, any questions and concerns that you all have, they're way more accessible now. So definitely take advantage of that. And then we have, the other applications that we were referring to, of course, such as the FAFSA, CSS profile, and then the other federal student aid resources. Definitely just take a look at these. Even if you don't have a burning question in your mind, it just certainly helps to review these websites, because oftentimes you'll come across information that you weren't aware that you really needed. So it's definitely helpful to take a glance at these sites beforehand. And then if you have any further questions, definitely call the school or the financial aid representative and they can help you out with that. All right, do you guys have questions?
I'm going to leave that slide up with our contact information, and I'm also going to drop it into the chat. Oh, let me go back. I'm going to drop it into the chat too, in case you all want to jot it down. Some of you may be a little bit shy on asking questions. I want to again tell you that I have been where a lot of you all are. Mm-hmm. And I definitely understand that we're probably asking you extremely personal questions about your family's circumstances. That is not something that you may want to share readily with a total stranger. But my job is to help you. And I'm sure Naomi can tell you this from my teaching, that I am extremely passionate about making sure that college is affordable. And not just the college you think you can afford, but I want you to go where your passion leads you. If that's a 4-year out-of-state school, go for it. We can make it affordable to you. And I want you to have true options and access to higher education in that way. I don't think I see any questions on the chat quite yet.
I don't see any either, but I did want to share. I don't know, I can share my screen probably. I do have my financial aid award letter from my freshman year in college.
Oh yeah, if you're not too shy to share it.
Yeah, no shame, no shame. It's cool that I can still access it. So I'll share my screen.
Okay.
And then I think you can remote, I can, okay. There we go. Oh, this one. Okay. So students, this is what a financial aid award letter looks like. Again, like Dr. Perez said, it'll be most of the time they're online. And so this is how I access mine, through my UNT portal. This is for my freshman year, and these are all the awards, Pell Grants, federal work study. Well, actually, this is for my sophomore year. And so most of the time you can see the summary. I was able to see what they were offering me for the fall semester, the spring semester, and again, a summary. There's an option where you'll be able to accept or decline. Please do not accept or decline any loans until you have had that conversation with your parent or guardian, and you know the implications of accepting a loan. But there's a lot of the information that Dr. Perez talked about, work study, grants, federal Pell Grants. My sophomore year, I did receive a continuing scholarship because of my GPA. And so this is just like a very basic outline of what a financial aid. Some of them might look a little more complicated. I haven't seen any other ones, But this one, I like that it's very, very specific and very straightforward. Let me stop sharing my screen.
What I was going to pull up, just looking at UNT Dallas, just to get an idea of what your costs are right now. I don't know it offhand. untdallas.edu. I see the net price calculator. And so it has your cost of attendance to live on campus, paying in-state tuition, $23,422 for the year, for the current year. So with the financial aid package that Nayeli just showed you, I think I saw you had about $17,000 in total financial aid. So that covers all but $6,000 of her cost. That's a pretty generous financial aid package.
This was at UNT Denton, but I did receive money back every year, actually. I think sophomore through my senior year, I received about $1,000 back, or almost 2,000 as a refund, because I maxed out on financial aid and scholarships and grants and academic scholarships, or like the departmental scholarships do. So that's also the cool thing once you have those racking up.
And that does happen. On occasion, I'll see a student who's been really good about searching for outside scholarships, putting together a good package of grant money from the school, from the federal government, from the state, that oftentimes you can cover everything and then still leave money to help with those incidental expenses that you'll have at that school. I saw Marcus with your comment in the chat. Come on, with no loans. I actually graduated from my undergrad without any federal student loans. But again, it was a total, I'm dating myself right now. I went to college in 1993, do the math. So back then, housing was only $700 a semester. And the public four-year school, yeah, I'm not bragging, but I was a super nerd, but my mom was super broke. So I got the full Pell Grant also, but back then the cost of college is nowhere near what it is right now. And I went to Mississippi State University, the same university with the same Pell Grant award right now. Pell Grant will only cover about 30% of the cost. Back then it covered 71% of the cost. So I had no idea what students at that school are doing to put together a good financial aid package to cover it without having to rely on student loans. The other thing that I did in my doctoral program, I did a payment plan, because unfortunately, I wasn't making enough money at my current full-time position to cover all of my tuition and fees, because graduate students can't get grants. You can only get federal student loans or scholarships. And I didn't get enough scholarships. So I just did a monthly payment plan and budgeted it so that I didn't have to get a loan to cover the rest of my cost. That's also something to sit down and talk with your mom and dad about. If they are willing to say, you know what, Consuela, which is what my mom told me, you know, I can't afford you and can afford to pay for wherever school you want to go to. Back then, my top three schools were Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, and the University of Alabama. Vanderbilt's a private university, a pretty good private university. University of Alabama is a public university, but I would have had to have paid out-of-state tuition. So I'm in my head when I'm trying to see where, well, is this Pell Grant going to get me in these scholarships? Luckily, with hard work, I was able to qualify for a National Hispanic Scholar. So I was able to get my tuition and fees if I had decided to go to University of Alabama, because they needed more Hispanic students. And they were going to cover all of my tuition and fees, and I basically had a full ride. But I made ultimately the decision to stay close to home because I didn't have a car and I didn't have a way of getting back from Tuscaloosa, about 90 miles away. So I decided to stay a little bit closer home. And I know for some of you that may be a deciding factor, that you may need that family support. And fortunately for us and you all, Dallas has a ton of really good colleges and universities, public, private, 2-year, 4-year, that you have to choose from. HBCUs, Hispanic serving institutions, that you have the full gamut of schools to choose from. So I don't want you to feel limited that if your choice is to stay closer to home for whatever the reason is, you still have a lot of wonderful resources locally. And that's not to say that you can't transfer at some point in the future either. Someone asked the question in the chat, is there a certain amount of scholarships a student could get in a year? Yes. And what happens, that college cost of attendance, that's usually the cap of what you can get at that school, which means that any combination of grants and scholarships can't exceed that cost of attendance. At a school like UNT, that their cost of attendance is a little bit over $23,000. Obviously, the combination of the federal Pell Grant, the state grant, you'll get close to that cost of attendance pretty quick with grant money. So it's that other items that you'll stack on top of that that can help you be able to go to school with no loans or minimal loans at the best. But cost of attendance for your college or university is typically where colleges and universities will cap you. Some universities will even state specifically in their policy that we will only award you scholarships and grants to cover tuition and fees, or to cover tuition and fees, room, and meal plan, but they'll usually specifically state that when you're looking at their financial aid websites. Another question on the chat was, can you get more scholarships while in college? The answer is yes. For those of you who are 100% certain about what you're going to do for the rest of your life at 17 years old, God bless you. I changed majors 3 times, and the research shows that the average college student changes majors between 3 to 5 times unofficially. Now, whether you go through the process of doing it is a totally different thing. Most of the time, you all just start taking classes for another major without officially changing it. So because of that, and I say that because a lot of colleges' departments have scholarships specifically for students majoring in that major. Sometimes they limit the scholarships just to incoming students coming out of high school. They may limit it to students coming from a community college or transferring, or they may limit it just to students who are currently enrolled at that university who already have some college credit. So it really just depends at that school on whether or not their scholarships are restricted to returning students. But I will be very transparent. Most and the biggest scholarships are usually going to be at the point that you're accepted for admission to the school, typically at most colleges and universities. But some limited department scholarships are usually available. I did see the comment about Go Bulldogs. And the University of Alabama is a great institution. It is, and I'm not saying that because of the football team, although I know some of you are choosing colleges for football teams and other athletic performances. But if at all possible, and I know COVID is making this very difficult, if you can't physically attend a campus because of the pandemic, a lot of colleges and universities are having virtual admission visits or virtual workshops that you can still do a virtual campus visit or meet with an admission counselor, professors and students in a virtual environment before you make this really important decision. You kind of want to get a feel on what your fit is like at that college or university. For those of you who've never been to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, or to Starkville, Mississippi, it's out in the middle of nowhere. Just so you know that. I was having this discussion with a colleague of mine about Starkville, Mississippi. The restaurants close at 10 o'clock. Yeah. Yeah, it is culture shock. My mother is from Mississippi, and I grew up in Mississippi for about 16 years before I moved to Texas 18 years ago. But I'm originally from Chicago. So when I moved to Mississippi from Chicago, it was, first of all, not hearing the usual sounds of the city like sirens, fire trucks, police, sometimes gunshots. It was unusual being in the country where you can actually see the stars and smell and see all the beautiful things that nature has. But as a college student who may be looking for a different college experience, if you go to a town that doesn't even have a mall, and the only thing that people hang out at is Walmart because there is no Target, that can be a big culture shock for some of you. Tuscaloosa is a tad bit bigger. They actually do have a mall with a few stores in it. But by and large, Tuscaloosa is a pretty small town for the most part. It does have one interstate that goes to Birmingham, going to Atlanta. You all have interesting questions. When I am in school, do I have to always apply for good scholarships, or do people mostly reach out to you for good scholarships? Actually, it's a good combination of both. So on our websites, you'll see oftentimes we'll list the various scholarships that we have at our schools, and then how you apply for those particular scholarships. Now, a good scholarship is any scholarship that you can receive. That's a good scholarship. Now, some scholarships will have a little, let's just say, carrot that you have to do. Those of you who are athletes know that if you get an athletic scholarship, you have to be an athlete. If you get a scholarship for things like performance arts, whether it be dancing or music, you have to perform in order to receive the scholarship. But what if you change majors? You typically lose the scholarship tied to that particular major, if it's a scholarship tied to a specific function or performance. But for most scholarships at most colleges and universities, it's going to be a general scholarship that's usually tied to a GPA, usually having to complete a certain number of hours, and usually it gives you a time frame, like 8 semesters or 10 semesters to receive it. Is it recommendable to apply to scholarships of is it recommendable to apply to scholarships of high amount to start saving up money for next semester, or as you keep going, you keep applying? It's both, actually. So if you're able to receive a good bit of scholarships coming straight out of high school, when you get the refund check that Naili was talking about, and I used to do this too when I was getting refunds as an undergraduate student, I would save that refund check up at the beginning of the semester. I'd never had that much money in my pocket at one time because I didn't have a bank account either. So when I would get a $4,000 refund check at the beginning of the semester, in my head, I'm having to think, divide by 5 months in the fall semester. I need this money to last for the rest of the fall, or else I'm gonna run out of money. And so that's how I budgeted for that. Now, if I had kept some of that money for the next year or for the summer in particularly, especially for those of you who may want to do an abroad experience when the pandemic lets up, or if you want to co-op or intern, saving that scholarship money can also help you with some of those expenses. Because traveling, even though it's an awesome experience to do, for those of you who have the opportunity to do it, we strongly encourage you to do it in college. Traveling can be expensive for those study abroad programs. Just the transportation alone to go abroad can sometimes be in the thousands of dollars. Let's see, other question. If a student applies for an external scholarship, is it guaranteed that a university will accept it? A university, if you get a scholarship from any number of organizations, as long as that organization doesn't have a restriction on where you can get it, it doesn't matter. The only thing the external organization is going to ask you is, Consuela, where are you going to school? So we know where to send the check. That's all they're going to ask. Over the years, I've seen thousands of different organizations, churches, businesses, the Kingdom of Saudi or Republic of Saudi Arabia, whatever that check is, Brenda, that we get from Saudi Arabia for international students in Arabic, but it comes in USD. And when we get it, we process it accordingly for those students. So any external scholarships that you get, generally speaking, as long as that organization doesn't have a restriction on where you can get it, they just ask you where to send it, that's all. Next question, refund checks are pocket money? Yes. And for those of you who have never seen that much money, and I say this because I remember this experience of getting, okay, again, I'm dating myself, when we would have to stand in the line and actually endorse our check before they give it to us. And then we have to decide, do I want to cash it? Do I want to deposit it? Do I need to go to Walmart and start buying my, comforter and my sheets and my towels right now? How much can I do that? But you need to make sure that you have a discussion with your family, but also you use some good financial literacy skills to budget that money accordingly, because those refund checks don't come like a paycheck every bi-weekly or monthly. Typically, it comes at the beginning of the semester, and you'll get another one typically at the beginning of the next semester, assuming that the financial aid you got in the fall semester is the same in the spring. Oftentimes with first-year students I've seen, don't be surprised that an outside scholarship is only for one semester. So they'll send all the money up front in the fall, and then you're thinking you got this $1,000 scholarship again in the spring, when they were like, no, we gave it to you as a one-time award. So you need to budget that money to split it 500 and 500 per semester. For refund checks, universities offer financial education, right? Actually, we do. We are required to have what we call financial literacy programs at our colleges to help students figure out things like budgeting. I haven't done a financial literacy session in a while. I actually tried this out on my elementary kids once, where I forced them to just figure out what they did as a profession. And I gave them like Monopoly chips to figure out how much Wi-Fi cost, how much car insurance cost. One of my sons pretended that he was a nurse, and my other one was just working part-time as a customer service agency. So he was upset that he couldn't afford really good Wi-Fi. He had to get like the not so good Wi-Fi for his games. But I explained to him that this is kind of how the real world works. The more money that you make, the way that you can afford to do things that may be a little bit higher on the financial realm than a student who's just getting by on a minimum wage job. If we apply for scholarships for your last year of college and you pay everything off and you still have some scholarship money, what happens to that money? You get a refund check. And every once in a while, we will see graduating students who will get some type of scholarship that very last semester that was tied to them graduating. Every once in a while, we'll see it at schools. It's always an awesome thing too, when you can get one of those. So if you ever have a credit later in the semester and all of your tuition and penalties, Francine, I can hear you. If everything is paid for and you get extra money in, then that money comes back to you, the student, as long as you haven't gone over the cost of attendance for your college and university. They're going to give it back to you. It's a wonderful problem to have. You all have really good scholarship questions too, by the way. I'm hoping for those of you, who's a senior, if you can raise your hand, just so I can get an idea. Or at least a little reaction. We only have one senior? Okay, I got a thumbs up, a couple thumbs up. So we only have 3 seniors in here?
4,
okay, now I have
4 now.
Time delay. So those of you who are seniors, first of all, congratulations. Post-corona, and hopefully you all have a decent high school graduation, that you have a huge decision to make in a few months. Don't feel like you're going to make a bad decision. You're going to make the best decision with all the information that you have, the wonderful program that Niallie's put together for you, and I'm sure many, many others to help you as you're going along the way. You have wonderful resources like Brenda and myself to reach out to for those last minute burning questions. And you may get a little nervous trying to figure out, am I doing everything right? No one ever has it figured out 100%. Reach out to the people that you have as resources to help you through this process. You'll get it, but we're not expecting you to have it 100% figured out, but just to have an idea so we can help you along the way. I want to see a couple of juniors too. So you all have a heads up so that you get the benefit of hearing it now and you'll be able to prepare for next year. If you haven't already, I think the SAT and ACT are going to be offered this spring. And a lot of schools are, and we didn't talk about this, about the test optional right now. You've seen a lot of colleges and universities go test optional. And again, it's a decision because you've got to balance out if me submitting this test is going to make me a more attractive admission applicant and or scholarship applicant. You've got to make that decision. Now, the way that you make that decision, you need to do some research and contacting the admission counselor at that school too, to figure out what's the average in the past, ACT or SAT that you all usually accept for admission and then scholarships. And that usually will help you make that decision. Some universities are going to continue that process next year for those of you who are juniors. So looking on their websites now, some of them are already starting to put that information out there on whether or not they're going to be test optional for the next school year. Is it bad to consider not going to college? No. Full disclosure, I have a 19-year-old son who is not in college. That's saying a lot for a mom who has a PhD, that I didn't lean on him like, nope, you're going, you're going, you're going. But the one thing I wanted to empower him is that everyone has to reach their decision about what they want to do with their life themselves. Can't live your life for you. And even if you don't decide to go to a four-year college or university, I worked at Tarrant County College for 7 years before I came back to SMU. And one of the things I learned working at TCC, students come from all walks of life for any number of reasons. Students who are coming straight out of high school and grandmothers and granddads coming back to get credentialed in order to do certain types of vocational jobs. And what was wonderful about that, not just the considerable cost savings that they had, is that everyone had an opportunity to do something that was going to better themselves. That's what I would impart on any student who's trying to make the decision. Do I want to go to college? Do I want to take a gap year? Do I want to try a 2-year school or 4-year school? Do I want to stay closer to home or go away? Maybe the military is a route. Maybe deciding that I want to work full time and figure it out. It's no, my brother is a year older than me and he finished his college degree when he was about 40 after not going to college. He went to the military and did that for a while and then worked. Decided that he wanted to go back to school when he was about 32. And it took him a little while longer to finish his 4-year degree. And I was super excited for him. He graduated from Abilene Christian University and he didn't know this and I didn't. When they called out who had the highest GPA and they called out my brother, I'm sure they have it on video. I screamed out loud in the entire Coliseum. I was so excited for him. And it just took him a different route in order to figure out what he wanted to do. He's a psychiatrist assistant at a state hospital in Abilene right now. But everyone has to make that decision on their own. It's never a one-size-fits-all for anybody about college, no college, what type of college or university. It's not a bad choice. I think the only bad choice is doing nothing. Your mom and dad don't want to see you sitting on the sofa this time next year if you're a senior. Doing nothing and doing this, playing a game or doing this, surfing on your phone. They just want to see you make an idea of that, where you want to lead for the rest of your life. No one expects you to have it 100% figured out. I have 2 teenage sons. I do not expect them to have it 100% figured out. When I was a high school senior, I had no idea that 20-something years later, I was going to get a PhD and be working at a college or university doing presentations for students to help you all figure out what I didn't have figured out at 17 years old. Never would have thought it in my wildest dreams, but that was the path that I was on in order to help guide you all and give you a little bit of experience before the internet existed and help you figure out how you can get college paid for without having to take out a lot of debt on yourselves or your families. There's money out there. I can't say that enough. There's money out there. It's just an issue of you applying and doing it on time. Those are the 2 biggest things. Someone asked a question, how should I determine if I should live on campus or off campus? Awesome question. I would say looking at that college or university, first of all, and this is research, this is me being nerd nihilist, so slap me for being a professor right now. Research shows if you live on campus, you have a higher GPA. Why is that? The more you stay connected to a campus physically, the more invested you are in that campus. This goes to student involvement theory too. But it's like immersing yourself in an environment when all you think and breathe is being on that college campus, you tend to have higher grades. You also have a larger support network. You don't have transportation issues. You typically don't have those other distractions. Some of you who have had the opportunity to do things like pay bills, if you live off campus, you will get the opportunity to pay bills and figure out when utility bills are due and how to install Wi-Fi and deposits and things of that nature. You don't have to generally worry about those things if you're living on campus. Living on campus is also different than it used to be, where oftentimes you're not living in a residence hall, quote unquote, dormitory. you're usually living in some kind of apartment style community where you're sharing a suite with people. Oftentimes, even your cafeterias are located in your residence halls. So it's not the same experience at any college or university too. A lot of schools also have different types of on-campus residential apartments, stereotypical dormitories, some that may be co-ed, some that may be single, some that may be a learning community for students in a different major. So it really just depends, not just on cost, but what you're looking to get out of your college experience. If you have the opportunity to have a roommate, for those of you who've never shared a room with anyone, it can be a wonderful experience. And I think the pandemic taught us this mostly, that our students who were living in private rooms struggled when they were literally quarantined by themselves. But at least the students who had one roommate to be connected to when they were in quarantine seemed to do a little bit better. Because your mental health is just as important as your academic health and your actual physical health. Mental health is a huge thing for students to help you get through college successfully. Huge, and being connected to people and resources. That's where living on campus has the benefit. Not to say the off campus can either, but usually students have a few more distractions when they're living off campus. How soon in college do you think I could be able to get a 2 to 3 bedroom apartment with roommates? How could I afford it? Most colleges and universities have a number of apartment communities that are adjacent to their campus that cater to college students at that university. Sometimes complexes that will have amenities that I couldn't even fathom as an adult living in Bedford, Texas. But it really just depends on you connecting with other students. Also, a lot of colleges will have message boards, whether it be in the student union or online, for people who are seeking roommates to share the expenses of living off campus, where it can make it affordable to live in an off-campus apartment. Again, it just really depends on what you want out of your college experience. The affordability part of it depends on how schwanky you want that college or a college apartment to be. You can get college apartments that will rival 5-star hotels with amenities. Sometimes they can be $1,000 a month, but you can also get apartments that are a little bit more affordable, that are more traditional apartments where you're having to pay for each item out of pocket or get everything rolled in. It just depends. Every university is going to have a number of apartment communities adjacent to their school, especially in bigger cities or colleges. Like when I was giving you the Mississippi State and Alabama example, those are college towns. So the town caters to the college student. You'll have a bunch of stuff around the college or university. Oh, thank you. Somebody gave me some compliment on my energy at 6:30 at night. Nayeli can attest with our classes from 5:30 to 8:30. I don't think my energy was that much different for the most part. I generally do enjoy doing this. I'm talking with you all because I feel a huge honor for not just the money I was given to go to college, but the experience and opportunity I was given, not just as a first generation student. I was the first person in my entire extended family. No cousins, aunts, uncles, nobody had ever gone to college before me. And so I knew I paved a path for so many of my siblings and cousins to do, but then just the struggle that I went through of crying in the financial aid office my first day and genuinely concerned, can I afford this? Not can I do the work, because I knew I could do the work, but can I afford this? Such a basic thing that I just needed an opportunity and someone to help guide me. That's my path in life for you all, is to help guide you. Someone had a question about, I'm a sophomore, can I start doing scholarships now? You sure can. I've seen students that, especially if you're competing in things during the summer, like summer camps, I've seen girls and boys stage, 4-H. Yes, I participated in 4-H, and I will gladly admit that I won the meat bowl in going into my junior year in high school. I am not going to even explain some of the stupid questions they asked in the meat bowl for 4-H, but you can receive scholarships even as a sophomore. particularly if it's an outside organization that's giving it to you based on a competition or something that you were involved in that you can use at some point in the future. That's usually how it works. Are scholarships also available for technical schools? They sure are. Again, looking on that technical school's website is where you'll see the information about any scholarships that they offer. But I will caution you that for most technical schools, you won't see a large number of them. Usually their costs too are typically going to be a little bit more expensive than a 2-year community college, but the programs are usually going to be almost the same. But the reason why those programs are more expensive is because they're private and because they know that the 2-year schools can't possibly accept every single student. So they have that leftover for students who still want to become a nurse, an automotive mechanic, a computer programmer, or what have you, to be able to afford coming to their school. Still receiving financial aid too. You still do the FAFSA application for that. Let's see. Somebody asked, oh, if you want to email either Brenda or myself or call, that's the reason why I gave you all our direct contact information. When you call, you will get one of us. That's our direct number. Where at any time, even if it's after hours, and especially if your mom and dad has a question, feel free to leave me a voicemail or email me directly, or Brenda if you don't want to ask one of us. If any of your parents are Spanish speakers, I would encourage you to reach out to Brenda so that she will respond back to you in Spanish with not, and this not specific to SMU, I just happen to work there, but it can be to any college or university that you're looking to go to. And both Brenda and myself have had the experience of attending and working at different schools. So chances are, as someone who is 45 years old, I'll admit that, and I've worked at a number of different schools. I have colleagues at financial aid offices and admission offices at those schools. So if you say, hey, Dr. Perez, I'm thinking about going to Rice, I know the director of financial aid at Rice. And so if I don't know your answer immediately, I can get the answer for you, probably more quickly than you may even get an answer back just because of my title. So use us for that. I encourage you to do that. And Niall is going to share the PowerPoint with you all for any of you that want a copy of it to reference back or to share with your family. I think that was all the questions. I hope I answered everybody. I thank you all for all the private messages. I'm sure you all were like, where's Consuela getting all these chats? I don't see it. But my chat is like this. I think that was the last question I got on the chat.
Great. Well, if there aren't any more questions, students, thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Perez and Brenda. Really appreciate it. It was very informative. I told my coworkers, I'm like, this brings me PTSD to my class. It was really fun though. It's good being on the opposite side. But it was really informative and it was really awesome.
I'm sorry. Have a good day. I'm sorry, my phone is lagging and I'm at work, but I do have a question.
Go ahead, Justice. Oh, I think she froze again.
I was wondering, like, when is the earliest you should start applying for college? Because I'm a junior, and is it okay if I start applying right now?
Brenda, do you want to handle that question about application for admission? Because you can talk about your experience recently going through that.
Definitely. So I do have a lot of experience in admissions as well. And so my personal advice is to wait until you're a senior, but only because there's a lot more information that has yet to come. And since you're probably fairly new to this process, there's a lot more questions and concerns that probably you're not thinking of just yet, but will come up later. So it's great that you're really enthusiastic about applying now, but go ahead and just sit tight. I would recommend, if you already have a solid idea of what schools you want to go to, do some more research, start getting in contact with their admissions team. If possible, even take a tour or like engage virtually, because I know that a lot of schools now have that option available. So just do that. And then also go ahead and take some time to research other institutions that you might want to be more interested in, you know, because there are a lot of schools that are probably really similar to the ones that you're already looking at. So it doesn't hurt to definitely expand, you know, the interests, the roles that you're looking at, the geographic region as well. So right now, just hang tight, do your research, and then when senior year does start coming around, definitely start applying. In the meantime, though, if you really do want to get started on at least something, I would recommend as well is that most of the admissions teams, if they have an essay, for instance, they normally don't change their essay questions each year. So you can also even potentially reach out to the admissions team and say, hey, do you have your essay questions? Do they change every year? If not, can you tell me what your question is? And so what I did for my time when I was in your shoes, I would work with my college counselors to just type up very, very rough drafts. And this was a lot, the majority of this was done my summer before I stepped in as a high school senior. So if you think that'll be helpful for you in kickstarting your application process as well, definitely look into that. Because in that time around, even if you want to apply like say early action, or even if you decide you want to apply early decision, you'll have like everything worked out and it won't be so stressful for you.
And Apply Texas should go online August 1st each year. I'm not sure if Common Application or the Coalition app is the same, but for Apply Texas, usually August 1st is when they trigger the application for the next school year. So awesome that you're super ambitious. But what Brenda said is really good information. Even if you're going to the websites, virtual tours, if you can visit in person, great, because the schools track that information. When you all show interest in our school, and particularly if it's a school that has selective admission, we want to see that you're genuinely wanting to come to school there. Remember when we talked about negotiating your financial aid package or your scholarships? That goes into that process where we see how often you've been connected to our school. So as early as you can get involved in that, especially with us doing so many virtual things, definitely want to take advantage of that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Alrighty. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I don't know if you have class today, Dr. Perez. Brenda, if you have anything else. But if students, you don't have any more questions, you all are free to go. Friendly reminder, just some housekeeping. Remember that we have sent an email with our first in-person Saturday session taking place on February 20th. We have not seen each other in like almost 2 years, so this will be the first time. And it'll be really fun. We're gonna do some yoga. We're gonna do some painting. Limited to 30 people. We only have 17 slots left. So check out that email and we will see y'all soon.
Miss Martinez.